snow swallowed every sound in the forest that night except one, a faint, desperate whimper, a sound no human could have heard. But he did, the retired Navy SEAL. Froze mid-step. His instincts screamed that something was wrong, terribly wrong. As he pushed deeper into the storm, the wind cleared just enough for him to see it. A police officer lying face down in the snow. Her uniform ripped, blood on the ice, ropes digging into her arms. And beside her, her K9 partner barely clinging to life, tied the same way. But what shattered him wasn't the scene, it was what she whispered when he reached her. "Please, don't let him find us again." What happened next? We'll break you. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The road was the kind of empty that made a man hear things: his own breathing, the crunch of his boots, the quiet arguments of the wind brushing through the pines. Daniel Halle had walked these trails for years, ever since leaving the Navy SEALs behind and retreating into the quiet corners of Montana, where memories didn't echo so loudly. But tonight felt different. The storm wasn't just weather, it felt like a warning. He adjusted the strap of his backpack, breath fogging in front of him as he moved steadily along the snowy path. The world was painted in white, soft and peaceful to anyone else, but years of combat had rewired his senses. Peace didn't calm him. Peace made him listen harder. A faint vibration rolled through his chest, the kind that came before something went wrong. He stopped walking, stood still, tilted his head. Nothing. But his instincts had never betrayed him. Not in the desert, not in the jungle. Not once. Daniel scanned the tree line, eyes narrowing. He didn't see movement, but the silence felt unnatural, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. A memory kicked through his mind, whispers of a mission gone sideways, an ambush he survived because he'd sensed danger seconds before it struck. That same feeling now coiled in his gut. "Stay sharp," he muttered to himself, cold air biting his lips. He turned his head slightly. There, something distant. Something small, almost too soft to register, a sound that didn't belong. It wasn't wind. It wasn't branches. It wasn't the groan of snow shifting under its own weight. It was almost like a cry. His heartbeat thudded once, hard. The woods stretched before him like a dark mouth swallowing flakes of white. And every instinct he possessed suddenly agreed on one truth. Someone out there wasn't alone. Someone needed help. And whatever had happened to them, the clock had already started ticking. Daniel tightened his gloves, squared his shoulders, and stepped off the road, moving toward the sound with the quiet determination of a man who had saved lives before, and feared what he might find this time. Daniel moved carefully between the snow-laden trees, each step deliberate, each breath controlled. The storm pressed against him like a living thing, swirling flakes, stinging his face and blurring the edges of the world. But he wasn't watching the storm anymore, he was listening. Truly listening. There it was again, a faint, sharp whimper carried by the wind. Not an animal, not the natural cry of the forest. This sound was strained, desperate, almost human. Daniel lowered himself slightly, scanning the ground for clues. The fresh snow had softened most tracks, but not all of them. Deep impressions, 2 sets, one lighter, one heavier, cut through the powder. Weaving between trees as if someone had been dragged or forced forward, he followed the trail. His pulse steady but rising. A torn glove lay half buried in the snow, frozen stiff. He crouched, brushing frost from it. The size was small, likely a woman's. The cuff held stitching dark blue, faintly metallic. Police uniform stitching? Daniel's jaw tightened. He stood and moved faster now, following the broken branches and uneven footprints. The whimper came again, this time clearer, as if someone tried to call out but couldn't muster the strength. Then another sound followed, a low, struggling growl. Daniel's heart dropped into a steady combat rhythm. A K9, wounded, weak. And wherever a K9 was, an officer wasn't far. He pushed deeper into the woods, snow whipping around him, visibility fading with every step. The forest grew strangely silent again, an unsettling, suffocating stillness. Even the wind seemed to pause, as if waiting for what Daniel was about to uncover. He approached a clearing. The tracks stopped abruptly, replaced by frantic scuffs in the snow. Signs of a struggle. Rope marks. Blood droplets darkening the white ground. The whimper echoed once more closer now. Fragile and fading. Daniel turned his head toward the heartbreaking sound. Breath hitching, someone out there was fighting to hold on, and he was running out of time. The clearing opened like a wound in the middle of the forest wide. Silent, untouched, except for the violent story carved into the snow. Daniel slowed his steps, every muscle bracing for what instinct already warned him about. The world around him dimmed, sounds fading beneath the pounding of his heartbeat. He saw the first shape, a dark figure lying face down, half buried in snow, motionless except for the faintest rise and fall of breath. A police uniform ripped, smudged with dirt and frozen blood peeked through the frost. The officer's arms were pinned awkwardly behind her, ropes digging into her wrists so tightly the skin beneath had turned a painful blue. Daniel's stomach tightened. He moved closer, dropping to one knee beside her. Her hair, damp with melted snow and sweat, clung to her face. A crimson smear stained the ground near her cheek, evidence of a struggle far more brutal than the forest's calm suggested. Then he saw the second shape, just a few feet away. Partially hidden beneath a drift of snow lay a German shepherd. The dog's chest rose shallowly, each breath strained and trembling. A rope cut across its torso, pulled taut behind the officer's back, binding them together like two prisoners dragged through the storm. Daniel reached out, brushing snow from the dog's fur. "Easy, easy, boy," he whispered, voice low and steady. The canine's eyes flickered open dark, pained but still fiercely aware. The dog tried to lift its head, but the rope tightened, forcing it back down. Daniel's jaw clenched at the sight. Whoever did this hadn't just wanted to hurt them, they wanted them helpless. He turned back to the officer. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" he asked, tapping her shoulder gently. A soft, broken sound slipped from her lips, a whimper weak, enough to be mistaken for the wind. Her fingers twitched. Her breathing hitched. Then, with tremendous effort, her eyes cracked open, dazed, terrified, searching for a face she didn't yet know was safe. The first thing she saw was him. And the first thing Daniel saw was raw fear, the kind that came from someone who hadn't escaped danger. "Only paused it, please," she rasped, voice barely forming the word. "He's coming back." Daniel leaned closer, snowflakes clinging to his eyelashes as he studied the officer's trembling face. Her breaths came in short, shallow bursts, each one sounding like it hurt. She blinked slowly, trying to focus on him, trying to believe he was real. "You're safe," Daniel whispered. "I've got you. Just stay with me?" But her eyes widened, not with relief, but with terror so sharp it cut through her exhaustion. She shook her head weakly. "No, we're not safe," she choked out. "He'll come back. He always comes back." Daniel's muscles tightened beneath his thick jacket. "Who?" he asked softly. "Who did this to you?" She swallowed hard, lips trembling as if the answer itself was dangerous. "A man. Wearing a badge," she whispered. "But he wasn't real police. He ambushed us. Said we'd seen something we shouldn't have." Her voice cracked as a shiver ran through her body, deeper than the cold. "I tried to fight. Rex tried too. But she winced. Her head dropping, Daniel glanced at the canine Rex. The dog lay motionless except for the faint tremble in his paws, eyes watching Daniel with desperate trust. "He tied us up," the officer continued, fighting for every word. "Dragged us into the woods. He said he'd be back after he took care of the rest." Her voice thinned to a whisper. I heard him walking away. But he said he'd return. He promised he'd come back to finish it." Daniel felt his heartbeat steady into the same cold rhythm he'd carried through battlefields. He scanned the trees, dark, endless, hiding shadows that could be inches or miles away. Snow muffled everything, even footsteps. "Listen to me," Daniel said firmly, gripping her shoulder with controlled strength. "He's not touching either of you again. I won't let that happen. Her eyes fluttered, the fight in her fading. Please, save Rex, she breathed. Save my partner. Daniel nodded once, solid and sure. As the storm howled around them, whoever that man was, whatever he wanted, Daniel was ready for him now. Daniel shifted toward the German Shepherd, the snow around the dog rising and falling with each labored breath. Rex's fur was stiff with frost, patches of it darkened where ice had formed over dried blood. The canine's ears twitched at Daniel's presence, but he didn't lift his head. He couldn't. The rope binding him to the officer pulled every time he tried, dragging painfully against his ribs. Easy, buddy, Daniel murmured, lowering himself to the dog's level. I'm here now. You're all right. Rex blinked slowly, his eyes cloudy with exhaustion yet still sharp with loyalty. Even half frozen, the dog tried to move closer to his handler, a weak attempt to protect her despite having no strength left. The small gesture hit Daniel harder than the icy wind ever could. He reached for the rope. The fibers were frozen solid, stiff as metal and biting into the dog's skin. Rex whimpered, barely audible, but enough to make Daniel pause, soften his touch, and work more carefully. Behind him, the officer stirred. Save him first, she whispered urgently, her voice cracking. Please. He didn't stop fighting. Not even when I told him to run? Daniel nodded, though she couldn't see it. He's a brave one, he said softly. He's my family, she murmured. My best friend? Daniel's hands moved faster now, guided by a surge of protectiveness. He had seen soldiers cling to their last breaths for their teams, but seeing a dog fight like this, it carried its own kind of heartbreak. When the final knot loosened, Rex exhaled a shaky breath, his body collapsing fully into the snow. For a terrifying moment, he didn't move. Daniel pressed a hand gently against the dog's side. Come on, Rex, stay with me, he whispered. Rex's tail twitched. Just once, but it was enough. Daniel slid his arms under the dog's torso, lifting him carefully. Rex rested his head weakly against Daniel's chest, trusting him instantly, as if he understood this stranger was now their only hope. Daniel glanced toward the officer, her eyes watching him with fading strength. I've got him, he promised. And I'm getting both of you out of here. Daniel eased Rex into a safer patch of snow, clearing the area with his hands so the dog could breathe without frost biting into his wounds. The officer watched weakly, her eyes glassy yet filled with guilt, like every moment Rex suffered was her fault. Daniel leaned toward her again. Tell me who did this, he said gently. The more I know, the faster I can keep you both alive. She swallowed, her throat working through the pain. He wore a uniform, she whispered. Badge, radio vest. Looked official. Looked like one of us. Daniel's jaw tightened. But he wasn't. She nodded slowly. I thought he was backup. We were responding to a suspicious vehicle call on the ridge. Dispatch said another unit would meet us. When I saw him, I didn't question it. Her breath shook, the memory weighing heavily. But when he got close, Rex growled. He never growls at officers. He knew something was wrong. Daniel could almost picture the moment snow blowing, a man stepping out of the tree line, face hidden behind confidence and cold intention. He pulled a gun on us, she continued. Said I had seen something I shouldn't have. Something inside the department. Her voice cracked. I didn't understand. I still don't. He attacked before I could call it in. Daniel's mind sharpened. Inside the department. A rogue officer or someone pretending to be one meant resources, connections, and a motive dangerous enough to kill for. He knocked me out, she murmured. Tied me and Rex together. Dragged us deeper into the woods. Said he had others to deal with first. Then he left. But he said he'd come back to finish the job. Daniel glanced at the surrounding trees again. Snowflakes fell in slow spirals, peaceful on the surface, hiding whatever monster walked beneath them. He's not done, she whispered, tears mixing with the cold. He'll come for us. Daniel's voice dropped into the low, steady tone of a man who had faced worse and darker places. Then he'll find me waiting. The wind shifted sharp. Sudden, carrying a warning Daniel felt before he heard it. The storm was changing direction, gathering force like a predator circling its prey. Snow began whipping sideways, stinging his face and blurring the edges of the world. If they didn't move now, the forest would swallow them whole. He slid one arm beneath the officer's shoulders, lifting her gently. She winced, a soft cry escaping before she could stop it. Daniel steadied her with a firm grip. "I know," he murmured. "I'm sorry. We have to move." Rex, now freed from the rope, tried to stand beside them. His legs buckled immediately. The dog collapsed into the snow, panting shallowly, body trembling from exhaustion and cold. He looked up at Daniel as if apologizing for his weakness. "You're doing enough," Daniel whispered to the canine. "Just stay alive." He lifted Rex carefully, cradling the dog against his chest. The officer watched with glassy eyes, her breath fogging softly in the icy air. "You don't have to carry both of us," she rasped, guilt heavy in her voice. "Leave me. Take Rex. He'll make it if you move fast." Daniel turned to her sharply, his expression unwavering. "I don't leave people behind," he said. "Not you. Not him, ever." Her lips trembled not from cold this time, but from something deeper, gratitude, relief, hope. But the forest didn't care. The storm crashed into them like a wall, wind screaming through the trees. Snow spiraled violently, erasing tracks, swallowing direction, making every step a battle. Daniel leaned forward, shielding both officer and dog with his body as he pushed onward through the white chaos. Visibility shrank to mere feet. The path vanished beneath fresh drifts. The world became a blizzard of noise and cold. Every few steps, the officer sagged, her strength slipping away. Daniel tightened his grip around her waist, keeping her upright. He shifted Rex slightly to balance the weight. "You stay awake," he urged her. "Talk to me." She forced her eyes open. Where are we going?" "Somewhere he won't find you," Daniel said through clenched teeth. "And somewhere you won't die in this storm." But even as he said it, the wind howled louder like something was following them, something getting closer. Daniel pushed forward through the storm, every muscle burning from the weight of the officer and Rex. Snow slammed against him from every direction, but he kept moving one step, then another, driven by instinct more than sight. The forest blurred into shifting shadows and white chaos, then something cut through the storm. Sound sharp enough to freeze him mid-step. Crunch. Not the soft, scattered crunch of falling snow, a deliberate step, heavy, slow, measured. Daniel's blood ran cold. He turned slightly, angling his body to shield both the officer and Rex. The wind roared around them. But the sound came again, another crunch, closer this time. Whoever was out there wasn't hiding. They weren't rushing. They were following. Stalking. The officer's hand tightened weakly around Daniel's sleeve. Her voice came out as a trembling whisper. "It's him. He's back." Daniel lowered himself behind a fallen tree, easing the officer down into a pocket of shelter formed by the trunk. He placed Rex beside her, the dog immediately pressing his weak body against her leg as if trying to protect her even now. "Stay here. Don't move," Daniel murmured. Rex let out a low, fragile rumble, his way of saying he understood. Daniel rose just enough to peer over the edge of the snow-covered trunk. His breath hung in the air, barely visible in the chaos of swirling flakes. The storm blurred everything, but not enough to hide the silhouette moving between the trees. Man. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving with unsettling calm, snowflakes caught on the brim of his hat, the edge of his jacket, the glint of metal on his belt. He wasn't stumbling or struggling like someone lost in the cold. He was hunting, step by step. The figure drew closer, head turning slowly as if sniffing out weakness, listening for breath. Movement, fear. Daniel's heart slowed into the calm, deadly rhythm of the soldier he once was. The storm, the cold, the pain, none of it mattered. Only the threat did. He crouched lower, muscles coiling. The officer's ragged whisper drifted up behind him. "Daniel, please, don't let him finish what he started." And Daniel made a silent vow. He wouldn't, not tonight. The storm swallowed sound. Light and distance, but not intent. Daniel stepped out from behind the fallen tree with the silent precision of a man who'd faced death too many times to fear it. The blizzard howled around him, snow slicing across his vision. Yet his focus narrowed to the single shadow moving toward them. The man paused, head tilting slightly as if he sensed the shift in the air. Daniel didn't move. Neither did the stranger, for a moment. The forest held its breath. Then the man spoke, voice muffled by the storm but dripping with recognition. "You're not supposed to be here." Daniel's fist tightened. "Neither are you." The figure laughed softly, a chilling sound swallowed quickly by the wind. "The officer said the same thing before she begged me." His boots crunched forward. "But don't worry. I still have time to finish the job." Daniel stepped sideways, forcing the man to angle away from the officer and Rex. He wasn't armed, not with guns, not with knives, but he had something far more dangerous: experience, instinct, and a will hardened through battles this man couldn't imagine. The attacker lunged. First, snow exploded beneath their feet as Daniel pivoted, letting the momentum slide past him. The man swung again, fast, heavy, untrained but vicious. Daniel blocked with his forearm, the impact jarring through bone. Then countered with a quick strike to the ribs. The man staggered but recovered. Rushing him with wild force, they collided, boots scraping ice. A struggle in the blinding storm, fists, elbows, shoulders, no room for mistakes, no room for hesitation. The attacker fought like someone accustomed to overpowering victims, not facing resistance. Daniel fought like someone who'd spent years surviving ambush in worse places than these woods. A punch connected with Daniel's jaw. Pain flashed white, but he pushed through it, ducking beneath the next strike and forcing the man into ASNO, WBNK. Behind him. The officer tried to lift herself on trembling arms. Rex let out a weak, fragile growl, encouragement, desperation. Warning. Daniel heard both. The attacker reached for something at his belt, a glint of cold metal. Daniel didn't think. He moved. A swift, decisive strike. The man dropped to his knees. Breath knocked from his lungs. The storm roared around them. Daniel stood above him, steady, unshaken, unafraid, and the man finally realized he had hunted the wrong person tonight. The man collapsed into the snow, gasping for air, hands clawing at the ground as if the cold could steady him. Daniel stood above him, chest rising steadily despite the storm battering his body. The attacker's composure cracked, not from pain, but from something darker: fear, recognition. He knew he was no longer the predator. Daniel grabbed the man's collar and hauled him upright, just enough for their eyes to lock. "You're done," he said, voice low and lethal. "Now tell me why you targeted a police officer." The man spat blood into the snow, smirking through a split lip. "She shouldn't have opened her mouth." Daniel's grip tightened. "About what?" A bitter laugh escaped him. "Corruption, fraud, evidence she wasn't meant to see. She stumbled into a case that didn't belong to her. A case belonging to people who don't appreciate questions." Daniel's jaw clenched. "So they sent you to silence her." "She was supposed to disappear," the man hissed. "An accident in the snow. A patrol gone wrong. No loose ends." Daniel leaned closer. "And the dog?" "Oh, him." The attacker's smile grew cruel. "He kept getting in the way. Should have put him down when I had the chance." A growl, weak but furious, rose behind Daniel. Rex, shaking, ears barely lifted, still found the strength to warn the man who hurt them. The officer weakly reached toward her partner. Whispering his name, Daniel's expression hardened. "You tied up an officer and her K9, he said. "Left them to freeze, and planned to come back and kill them." His voice dropped to a cold whisper. "That's not a mistake. That's a choice." The man's confidence faltered. "You don't understand? You're interfering with something bigger than—" Daniel yanked him closer. "I don't care how big it is." The storm howled as if punctuating his next words. "You won't touch them again." The man finally looked afraid, not of the cold, not of exposure, but of the soldier standing over him. And for the first time, He understood he wasn't dealing with a victim's rescuer, he was dealing with a SEAL. Daniel released the attacker just long enough to reposition himself between the man and the officer. Snow lashed the clearing, swirling in violent arcs, but the moment felt frozen, 3 lives hanging in the balance. The officer struggled to push herself upright, her arms trembling violently. Rex lay pressed against her, breath shallow. His fur rising and falling in painful waves, the attacker shifted suddenly, trying to reach for the weapon half buried beside him. Daniel lunged forward, grabbing him by the jacket. But the man twisted, desperation fueling his strength. They grappled in the snow, boots sliding, breaths clashing in white bursts. A metallic click cut through the storm. The attacker had gotten hold of the weapon. The officer gasped, her voice cracking. "Daniel!" Daniel turned just as the man aimed, his movements sloppy but lethal. There was no time to dive, no time to shield them. The officer's eyes widened in horror, but someone else moved first. Rex, weak, shivering, barely alive. He pushed himself up, legs buckling beneath him. Pain etched every inch of his body, but loyalty carved his path. With a final surge of strength, he lunged, not far, not fast, but just enough to crash into the attacker's arm. The shot fired, but the angle jerked upward, the bullet disappearing into the storm instead of Daniel's chest. Daniel seized the opening, a swift strike. Precise and unforgiving, the weapon dropped. The attacker collapsed, groaning as he hit the snow. Daniel kicked the gun out of reach and planted a knee against the man's back. Pinning him firmly, breathing hard, he turned. Rex lay trembling in the snow, his body collapsing from the effort. The officer broke into a sob, reaching for her partner. "Rex?" "No, baby. Stay with me," she whispered, pulling him close. Daniel knelt beside them, placing a steady hand on the dog's chest. Rex's eyes flickered open, soft, tired but triumphant. He rested his head against the officer's arm, tail giving a faint, final thump against the snow. Daniel's voice softened. "You saved us," he murmured. "You brave, stubborn boy. You saved us all." The wind roared louder than before, swallowing the clearing in a white, spinning chaos. Daniel tightened his grip on Rex and glanced at the officer, her face pale, lips trembling, breaths shallow and uneven. She was fading, slipping closer to the edge with every passing second. If they stayed here any longer, the storm would finish what the attacker started. "We're moving," Daniel said, voice steady but urgent. The officer tried to nod, but her head barely lifted. Daniel slipped an arm beneath her knees and another behind her back, lifting her as gently as his strength allowed. She gasped softly, pain etched into her features, but she didn't protest. She knew the truth. This cold wasn't just weather. It was a countdown. Rex whimpered as Daniel shifted the dog into his other arm. The canine's body felt lighter than it should have, too light. His breaths were faint, his fur coated with frost. Still, when Daniel held him close, Rex pressed his muzzle weakly against Daniel's jacket, trusting him completely. The attacker groaned behind them, pinned and defeated, but not worth a second glance now. Daniel cast one last look to ensure the man was disarmed and immobilized, then turned toward the forest. The storm was a wall, a living, screaming wall of ice and wind. Daniel pushed into it. Each step felt like wading through cement. Snow blinded him, slashing across his face, stealing what little warmth remained. He leaned forward, shielding the officer and Rex with his body, letting the storm batter his back while he forged ahead. The officer stirred slightly, her voice barely a breath. "Daniel, you can't carry us both." He grit his teeth. "Watch me." The world narrowed to white shapes and shadows. His boots sank deep into drifts, legs shaking under the triple burden, weight, cold, and fear. But he didn't stop. He couldn't. Every step was a promise he would not break. Suddenly, the officer slipped into unconsciousness, her head falling against his chest. Rex let out a low whine as if sensing her fading strength. Daniel tightened his hold. Breaths sharp and icy. "Stay alive," he muttered to both of them. "Just a little longer." Ahead, through the blizzard's fury, a faint dark shape emerged. Shelter. Hope. Maybe. Survival? Through the swirling white, the dark outline sharpened. A lone cabin, half buried in snow, forgotten by time but standing like a final lifeline. Daniel staggered toward it, each step heavier than the last. His arms burned, his vision blurred, but he held the officer and Rex tighter, refusing to let the storm claim them. The cabin door groaned as he forced it open. A blast of cold air followed him inside, but compared to the blizzard outside, it felt merciful. The interior was dim, dusted with frost, the remnants of old furniture scattered like ghosts of summers past. But it was shelter walls, a roof, a barrier between them and death. Daniel lowered the officer onto a worn couch, her head lolling weakly to the side. Her eyelashes were coated with ice, breath so faint he had to watch her chest to know she was still alive. He placed Rex gently beside her. The canine curled instinctively toward her warmth, his tail twitching with effort. Daniel worked fast, closing cracks in the walls with old cloth, pulling a torn blanket from a trunk, igniting a small fire from what scraps of wood he found. The flames sputtered at first, then slowly grew, casting a faint glow over the room. When he returned to the officer's side, her eyes fluttered open, glassy with exhaustion. "I'm slowing you down," she whispered. Daniel shook his head firmly. "You're alive. That's what matters." She blinked, tears forming despite the cold. "If you hadn't come, Rex and we wouldn't have made it." Daniel glanced at Rex, who lifted his head slightly and rested it against her leg. The dog's loyalty was a heartbeat in the quiet room. "No one dies on my watch," Daniel said softly. The storm howled outside, pounding against the walls like a beast denied its prey. But inside the cabin, protected by a fading fire and one determined man, hope finally had room to breathe. The fire crackled weakly, fighting the cold that seeped through the cabin walls. Daniel kept his eyes on the officer and Rex, monitoring their breathing, adjusting blankets, feeding the flames whenever they dimmed. Hours felt like minutes, and minutes felt like lifetimes. The blizzard outside raged with relentless fury, but inside, the air held a fragile stillness, broken only by the storm's distant roar. Then a sound pierced the night, a low hum. Faint at first, then growing deeper, helicopter rotors. Daniel exhaled a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. The emergency beacon he'd activated buried in his pack for years had finally done its job. The officer stirred, her voice barely above a whisper. "Back up?" "Yeah," Daniel said, standing to peer through a frost-coated window. "Your people?" "They're here." Red and blue lights flickered through the trees like ghosts cutting through the snowstorm. Vehicles crunched to a stop outside. Doors slammed. Shouts echoed orders, calls, coordination. The cavalry had arrived. Daniel stepped outside, shielding his face from the storm. A team of officers spotted him instantly and hurried forward. "Are you the one who placed the distress signal?" The lead officer yelled. Daniel nodded. Inside, one wounded officer, one injured K9, and one suspect restrained in the clearing. The man's expression hardened. "We'll take it from here." Medics rushed into the cabin. The officer's eyes filled with tears when she saw her colleagues' relief, safety, release. One medic gently lifted Rex, wrapping him in thermal blankets. The dog's tail fluttered at the familiar uniforms. "You're okay now?" one of them whispered to the officer. "We've got you." As they carried her out, she reached a trembling hand toward Daniel. "Thank you," she breathed, "for saving us." Daniel gave a small nod. "You fought just as hard." Outside, officers guided her to a waiting vehicle. Rex was placed in another, K9 specialist, tending to him with practiced care. The suspect Daniel subdued was soon located, arrested, and dragged through the snow, no longer a predator, but a prisoner. The storm still raged, but justice had found its way through it. The world looked different in daylight. The storm had passed, leaving the forest quiet and glistening under the morning sun. Daniel walked down the hospital corridor with slow, steady steps, the same steps he once used returning from missions, unsure what waited on the other side of the door. He paused outside room 217 and exhaled. Inside, the officer lay propped up on pillows, color finally returning to her cheeks. Rex slept beside her bed, wrapped in blankets, an IV line tucked neatly under his fur. The moment he sensed Daniel, The dog's eyes flickered open and his tail thumped softly. Weak but full of recognition. You made it, Daniel murmured, stepping inside. The officer smiled, tired but genuine. Rex insisted on staying until you came? Her voice carried warmth now, not fear. Doctors said he'll recover. Thanks to you. Daniel knelt beside the dog, running a gentle hand over his head. He's the hero, he said quietly. He saved us. Rex nudged his palm as if disagreeing. The officer watched them, emotion welling in her eyes. I thought we were done out there. I've never felt so helpless. She swallowed, her voice trembling. But you showed up like you'd been sent on purpose. Daniel looked up at her, a faint smile touching his lips. I was just in the right place. No, she said firmly. You were exactly where we needed you. The room fell into a peaceful quiet, the kind that comes only after surviving what should have ended you. Outside the window, snow melted in slow rivers beneath the rising sun. After all of this, the officer whispered, I'll never take another day for granted. And I'll never forget what you did. Daniel nodded, his voice soft but steady. Just promise me one thing? What's that? Take good care of him, he said, glancing at Rex. She smiled. Always. Rex lifted his head, pressing it gently against Daniel's leg in a silent, grateful goodbye. Daniel stood, giving them one final look. Two survivors who had fought together, bled together, lived together, a bond forged in ice. Unbreakable. And earned.